Now, underlying the International Labour Organization's work is the importance of cooperation between governments and employers and workers' organizations in fostering social and economic progress. And they do this by bringing all these entities together to set labour standards, develop policies and devise programs. Joining us now to discuss this a very complex set of ideas is Aeneas Chuma of Zimbabwe, who is officially the ILO's Assistant Director General and Regional Director for Africa. He's based in Addis, but he's in Johannesburg today. Sir, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much indeed for having me.
Absolutely, you're more than welcome. So, because this is an important juncture to discuss labor relations in Africa. We've got an economy that's growing on the continent, and sometimes when you listen to people talking about this, particularly the economists, they begin to talk about jobless growth, they talk about labor rights being flouted as these economies are growing. You sit at the ILO. We like to think an independent organization in that sense, in the government worker union construct, that helps to try and improve the work of the lot of the worker. When you look at the continent, are you concerned by any particular trends, traits that you see developing as the continent grows?
Well, yes, several. I think one of them relates to what you mentioned earlier, that African countries over the last decade have enjoyed significant macroeconomic growth. But we've also realized that that growth has not generated enough jobs to absorb the large numbers of school leavers that are entering the labor market every year. So there's need then to interrogate the growth. What type of growth are we looking for?
Right.
And what we bring to the table as an ILO is to try and encourage growth that is job rich, you know, but also growth that is inclusive, as it were, because part of the growth has been driven by primary products, really, natural resources, mines and all, which
exploitation of those and then exporting them.
Absolutely. But there's not been much transformation, really, and that's important. Beneficiation is extremely important as well, and that's where you have high quality jobs going forward.
What kind of help do you give? Because you look at a situation like South Africa, probably one of the countries with the highest amount of unemployed youths. I mean, 53% is the one number that I saw looking at the research. And we know there are challenges here. What do you say to them? What advice do you give them?
Well, let me start by saying that it's not unique to South Africa. It's unique to the world in general, but in particular to the African continent, because we're a very young population, as it were. Where the rest of the world is experiencing aging populations, we have very young populations and going forward. I think what we try to do to engage with the governments, and here as ILO, we work on tripartism. We work with governments as key, and we also work with employers' organizations as creators of jobs and wealth, but we also work with workers' representatives as well. So that's tripartism, and we try then to encourage, for example, to bring issues of job creation into the national debate, the national development strategy.
Is it an easy conversation? Is it a conversation that is constructed well and people are able to bring fresh ideas rather than pointing fingers and putting caps of ideology and all those other kind of people on people's heads?
Well, I think it's a constructive debate. If you look at some of the strongest economies of the world, they're based really on tripartism. Germany, I think, comes to mind easily. So we feel that this cannot be left to governments alone. I think you need to bring in social partners, in particular employers. They play a critical role, and also the workers as well. So although there may be disagreements here and there, I think by and large we find that there's agreement on probably 90% of the issues. There may be disagreement on how to go about it, and this has to be negotiated.
I'm going to ask a controversial question, but I'm holding it back for now. But I wanted to know, are South Africa's numbers worse because it is able to count? And I raise this issue in particular because of what I've seen around the continent. I mean, one of your functions, you say, is to provide labor market information systems. Are you able to sort of standardize this across the African continent? Because I remember when I went to Nigeria, one of the things that really struck me was the amount of children that you see working hard every single morning, and I'm thinking, why are they not in school? And I've seen it replicated around the continent.
Well, I think you're right. There are huge discrepancies and huge issues around the measurement of the issues. And frankly, on the African continent, it's not just in relation to labor, but across the board.
Even measuring the economic activity itself.
Absolutely, yes. But South Africa, I think, in a way, has very robust institutions. In South Africa, statistics is recognized as
one of the best in the world.
Exactly. So although the indicators may seem worse than the rest of Africa. I think there could be a problem with measurement as well. I think partly because things are better measured here.
Sure.
I think this is one of the arguments, again, when HIV/AIDS came on the scene previously. So our role is basically to strengthen the capacity of national institutions.
Absolutely, across the continent.
Across the continent, across the board, to collect information on employment, on unemployment, on job creation, on even underemployment, which is a major problem, and in some cases informality. The whole idea is to make sure that when the debate happens between the social partners, it's based on facts and figures and correct information, so that proper strategies and policies can be brought to the table.
When I see you in Johannesburg, I think, okay, now you are coming to Johannesburg, and we know that South Africa has been dealing with real labor issues. I mean, we've had the longest strike in the country's history that has done the most damage ever. In fact, more than what was done during apartheid. At the same time, we also have these wildcat strikes that take place across the country every single time we get into, as we call it, strike season. And then at the same time, we also have the violence that comes through with that strike. Do you work with the South African government to try and address these issues, and the other parties, of course?
Yes, we work very closely with the government, with the labor movement, as well as with the employers. And during my visit, of course, I'll meet with the government, but I just had a meeting with NEDLAC, and we also met with COSATU, and we're going to meet with BUSA. Now, our responsibility really is to promote a constructive dialogue in this respect. Ultimately, these are national questions, as it were. And we do provide technical support. We've got a very good team based in Pretoria that supports not just South Africa, but it also supports several countries in the region in this respect. So our role is facilitation, provide technical support where we can, and encourage constructive dialogue.
What's your assessment? Is that constructive dialogue taking place?
I think more could be done. Because the tremendous institutional capacity in the country, and capacity to engage in a constructive way, to inform policy, as it were. We, of course, watch with concern the fragmentation to some extent of the labor movement. But of course, workers have got the right to organize themselves as they see fit. It's not necessarily a bad thing. The point is to raise the profile of the issues affecting the constituents, be it the business constituency or the workers' movement. So we remain engaged. We provide support. In South Africa, it's much more at the strategic and policy level, because we do have functioning institutions.
That's true.
It's not so in other parts of the continent that I cover in my responsibility.
Absolutely. I suppose part of the noise is because of the strength of those institutions.
I think so.
And positions as well. So my trick question comes. There's been a suggestion that one of the ways in which the violent nature of the strikes that we see here, as well as the confrontational type of engagements that you see between labor and governments, labor and companies, could be resolved by introducing balloting. From the ILO's perspective, and from your experience working around the continent, would that be something that helps to democratize the strikes, so to speak?
Well, it's very difficult to say. I think the principle in terms of one of the conventions that South Africa signed on to, which is referred to as Convention 87, it gives workers the right of the freedom of association and to engage, and where they feel that there's not been enough progress, to opt for strike action to the extent that even employers also can lock out. But I think what is, without undermining the public interest, as it were, what is important is to engage constructively and positively and going forward. So the issue of the federation of these organizations is to ensure that they are representative of the workers, that they have proper governance systems in place, and that there is a governance infrastructure and the legitimacy, so they can speak on behalf of workers.
Do you work with the unions on that?
Yes, we do. We work very closely with COSATU and other unions. I think part of our mandate is to strengthen the capacity to engage in this respect. Now, the question of the ballot that you refer to is really neither here nor there. I mean, the issue is to ensure that the unions are legitimate. Not just the unions, but even the employers' organizations, they're legitimate. They do represent a constituency. They have governance structures, and they periodically refer back to their members to validate their mandate in the presence and all that, so they can genuinely represent their constituencies.
I've just been told we're running out of time. We've got a minute left, so I have to ask you to wrap up if you like, but just giving us some of the strategic initiatives that you're taking to try to improve worker rights across the continent.
I think we're trying to go beyond worker rights. I think what is critical is to try and influence the employment issue. I think that's critical to the survival. Everything else falls under that, really. We have also seen that despite growth over the last decade in Africa, there's an increase in inequality. We need to come up with social protection and social protection floors as well. We are strengthening social dialogue between the tripartite partners and going forward, and also dealing with issues around labor migration.
Absolutely.
So it's a broad array.
And that's an important one, especially labor migration, because I would like to be able to go wherever I want and work wherever I want if possible without my rights being undermined. Unfortunately, we have to leave it there. Aeneas Chuma, he is the ILO Assistant Director General and the Regional Director for Africa at the International Labour Organization, is based in Addis Ababa.